What's going on, guys? It's Red Bull Tanker, and welcome back to Axis and Allies 1951 Global 40 Edition, Turn 9. It has been quite the turn with some possibly game-ending moves, so let's get right into it. Alright, so the Soviet Union had 85 IPC to spend. Let's see here. They bought... for Europe. They bought 10 infantry for Slovakia. They put 3 infantry in Emir. They put an airbase down in Slovakia. They put 3 infantry in Iraq and 3 mech in Berlin and a fighter in Poland. Combat. Alright, the Soviets did 2 things to combat this turn. First, they took a jet and they took a jet and a strategic bomber and hit a U.S. cruiser and 2 transports in C-Zone 95. They killed the U.S. ships, but they did lose a jet along the way. And then a Soviet strategic bomber bombed the factory here in Rome for 3 damage. Not a lot. The Soviets did unfortunately make a mistake. They totally forgot about bombing the U.S. here in Tokyo. So that was kind of on them. So then at the end of the turn, the Soviets collected 70 IPC with 3 for bonuses, totaling out to 73 IPC. Alright, coming over here to NATO. Alright, NATO had 33 to spend. They paid off the damage to the miner in Paris, the miner in southern Italy. They paid to upgrade the Paris factory back to a major and bought an artillery. They did no combat, didn't really do any non-combats other than move that Lend-Lease tank from Normandy to France. And at the end of the turn, they collected 40 IPC plus 5 for bonuses, so they took in 45 this turn. China. Alright, for China. China had 45 to spend. They bought 5 infantry in Peking. They bought 3 infantry in Shanghai, 3 infantry in Jiangxi. And then they put 2 more subs down. Combat. The Soviets did 2 things of combat this turn. First, they took the 2 subs they bought last turn, went down here to Borneo and attacked the Sato cruiser in 2 transports. They did win, but they did lose a sub in the process. And then the Chinese took a shot at taking the Philippines. They attacked with 2 infantry and artillery and a tank. Sato had 4 airborne. They had a AAA, 4 airborne units, I believe. And then an artillery. Unfortunately, the invasion did fail. They were only able to kill the AAA and 1 airborne, and then the Chinese lost their entire force. Not much in the way of non-combats. They did take a mech from Shanghai and put it up in Peking, and then they took some infantry from Peking and put them into Manchuria. And so at the end of the turn, the Chinese collected 37 IPC plus 3 for bonuses and plus 4 for war bonds, so they ended up with 44 IPC. Great Britain. This is where a lot of the potential game-ending moves kind of came from this turn. So Britain had 29 to spend. They lend-leased 1 tank to NATO. They did buy 2 technology dice, and they were able to unlock the heavy transports. So now all their sea and air transports can transport 3 units at a time. Then they bought an infantry, an artillery, and an air transport that they dropped in London. And then they also bought a self-propelled gun that they put down into South Africa. Right there. Combat. Alright, this is where things got pretty wild. Alright, so first The British took their two infantry, their self-propelled gun, and the fighter from Paris. Well, they took the two infantry and self-propelled gun from northern Italy and the fighter from Paris. They attacked the Soviet defenders in southern Germany. They killed 2 enemy infantry, but also lost 2 enemy infantry. But now the southern German zones goes back to American control, since the Americans are administering the southern Germany occupation zones. And then finally, the Brits launched a massive attack. They launched a seaborne invasion of Berlin. They brought in all their forces from the Army of the Rhine. They also brought in their forces from London. And I think should have wrote down the total numbers for that one. But in the end, so the battleship, so there was a battleship. It had an offshore bombardment. It hit and killed a Soviet mech. And then in one round of combat, the Brits destroyed 5 mechanized infantry and 3 tanks, while the Soviets scored against 3 British infantry. And so that was all the combat for the Brits this turn. Not a lot for non-combat other than bringing their ships from the Pacific back here to South Africa, and then moving some of their planes around. And then at the end of the turn, Britain collected 30 IPC plus 3 for bonuses. I did realize that I was not giving them the bonus for controlling Transjordan. I have not been giving them that bonus for the last couple turns. That was my mistake. I did decide that I wouldn't give them that IPC boost, just on the sole fact that, just kind of looking at the board, I don't know if they're really going to need it now. Alright, Sato. Okay, Sato had 35 to spend. They also lend-leased a tank to NATO. They bought 3 airborne for the Philippines, and those 2 destroyers do not go there. And then these 2 destroyers were deployed off of Borneo. My mistake. Combat this turn, the only combat was they took this jet from Borneo and attacked the 2 defenseless Chinese transports that were sitting off the Philippines. Didn't want to leave any chance of the Chinese trying to come back and launching another amphibious invasion of the Philippines. And then non-combats, Sato moved this air transport with an infantry and artillery from Sydney up to the Philippines to reinforce there. And so at the end of the turn, Sato collected 28 IPC plus the 5 for bonuses. However, this sub was able to knock 3 IPC off of Borneo, so they did get a -3. And so they ended the turn with 30 IPC. Alright, the United States. Alright, so the U.S. had 85 to spend. They bought an infantry, fighter, and jet that they placed in Japan. They bought a tank and 2 transports for Egypt. Then they kind of did their usual 2 infantry, 2 self-propelled guns, and a tank for the eastern United States. And then the U.S. graciously lend-leased NATO a jet fighter. Got to get... the Allies have decided to pool their resources to try and get NATO back up to strength pretty quick. Alright, combat. There was only one major thing of combat this turn, and that was the U.S. forces in the Pacific launched an invasion at Vladivostok. So there was a sub and 2 destroyers, and then in that sea battle, those were lost, and the U.S. only suffered damage to the aircraft carrier. The Soviets did have a AAA gun, and it did manage to knock out the U.S. B-29 that had been harassing the communists from Japan the entire game. And then in the final assault on Amur, for the first round, the Soviets lost a AAA gun, 5 infantry, 2 artillery, and their Tu-4 strategic bomber. The U.S. lost the 2 infantry from the 90th Division, the 2 airborne from the 11th Airborne, and 1 Marine from the 6th Marine Division. The Soviets did elect to retreat into Manchuria, and during the retreat, they did lose 1 infantry. On the non-combat, the U.S. brought some AAA into Amur to protect its forces there, though the Communist air forces aren't that well established either in the Pacific. Over in Europe, for the non-combat, the U.S. Hold on. I think I messed something up here. Hold on. 1, 2. Oh, yep, I did screw one thing up. My bad. All right. So, what the U.S. did in Europe for non-combats, so they pushed the First Army into southern Germany, as well as the armor and SPAs that were in Rome to reinforce southern Germany. They moved the 89th Division into northern Italy. The bulk, the Third Army headquarters reestablished itself in Marseille and took in some reinforcement. Took in the reinforcements that came from here. There is supposed to be 2 transports with some tanks and an SPA. The forces that were in Brazil, I somehow miscounted, and they were not supposed to get to southern France. I don't know why I have them in southern France. So I will have to break that. I'll have to break up the French forces, or the southern France forces here, and redistribute those 2 transports and stuff like that. I'll do that off camera. And then the U.S. Kind of realizing that if I want to buy just regular fighters, if the U.S. wants to buy regular fighters to send them to Europe, they're definitely going to need a carrier for a bridge, because since the fighters can only go 4, they can't even reach their allied. They can't even reach Portugal, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So they can't even reach Portugal. So the U.S. is gonna have to, in this game, the U.S. is gonna, if they have the money to buy a carrier, or if they're in a good position in the Mediterranean to move their med carrier out, move it out into the Pacific to act as a bridge, so it can get regular planes all the way over to Europe. Which actually, now that I think about it, I should get. Ooh, I am in a port. So one thing I forgot to share is that starting on turn 8, the U.S. and the Soviets can buy 2 new units. Just real quick, let me see if I can. Yeah, just give me a second. Okay, so on turn 8, both sides, there are 2 different units that the U.S. and the Russians can buy starting turn 8. So for the U.S., they can buy these angled deck aircraft carriers. Their ability is they allow the U.S. carriers to now carry 3 aircraft, and I believe the stats are still. The carriers will attack at a 1 and defend on a 2. And then I don't have any pieces readily available, but the U.S. can now buy B-52 bombers, and the B-52s. So for the B-52s, it is they can fly. they can go 7 spaces. They roll 2 dice for combat and strategic bombing. And then obviously pick the best result. And then they can carry up to 2 atomic weapons. So that's the B-52. And then for the Soviets, they can get the Tu-95. They're the same thing as the B-52s. They can go 7, roll 2 dice for any attacks, and can carry 2 atomic weapons. The other thing that they can buy are battle cruisers. I don't have any pieces for them. I've basically just been using a gray marker from Historical Board Gaming, and then just holding it, just putting it upside down, and then putting it, and then just kind of using it as a marker, like under one of the cruisers. But so for battle cruisers and the angle deck aircraft carriers, you can actually upgrade existing carriers or cruisers to those units. All you have to do is make sure that the ship is in a port or is in a sea zone bordered by either a port that you own or a port that your ally owns. You will pay, you'll pay 5 IPC for the upgrade, and then the unit sits in that zone for basically a full turn. It sits in dock till the beginning of your next turn. It can still defend itself if if an enemy fleet came into the zone here. So say the US paid the 5 to upgrade the carrier. Carrier goes into dock for the next turn. If the Soviets were able to break out of the Black Sea and somehow get here, the carrier would still get to defend itself, though at a 1, not a 2, because it is in dry dock. And that goes the same for that pretty much goes the same for cruisers. The Soviets would pay 5. It'd go into dry dock for a turn, and then if it were attacked while in dry dock, it would defend at a 2 instead of a 3. So when they're in port or when they're in dry dock, it is a -1 to their defense. All right. So then at the end of the turn, no, I haven't gone over that yet. All right. So that was pretty much the U.S. Again, I got to break up the Third Army real quick because I did not do that correctly, but I can at least do this. Put him back, and then I'll break up the units from the Third Army. Okay, so then at the end of the turn, the U.S. collected 74 plus 17 for bonuses. They also saved 5 from their purchases, so the U.S. collected a whopping 96. Though I think the Soviets still hold the record for most IPC for a turn. And thus brings us to the end of turn 9. Just kind of looking at it, I don't think this is going. At least it's not going to be a victory for the communists at this point. Now, I'm pretty sure the communists have reached their high water mark. I don't think the Soviets really. I don't know if the Soviets are really going to have the strength to push back in Europe. I think it was a little too late, and I'll do one more turn. I'll do a turn 10 just to kind of play out the last turn, but I think it's pretty clear that the Soviets and the Chinese are not going to be able to rally to score a victory. And so even coming down here, victory cities, the communists in the east still hold 5, or no, actually they both hold 4 victory cities, because I just realized Vladivostok was taken. So it's 4 victories cities on both sides of the board. It's going to be pretty hard for both sides to really come back from this. So like I said, I'll do one more turn, but I think that's probably going to be it. So that's it for turn 9, and we'll see you guys next time for turn 10. So until then, guys, as always, take care.